What's going on YouTube? Welcome back to Nice Gaming. My name is McGarvin and you're tuned into a brand new episode of Renew or Revoke, where we look at your favorite things, but it's video games. Growing up, my parents were never really strict on the kind of media we could consume. We could pretty much watch anything or play anything, but my mom always had two rules. 1, no Jerry Springer. 2, no Grand Theft Auto. So imagine my frustration when one of my favorite rappers at the time, 50 Cent, released his own video game, and my mom decided it was too much like GTA to be allowed in her house. Stupid, right? Definitely. But the other day I was thinking, you know what? I'm a grown-up now. I don't have to listen to her. God damn it, today we're playing 50 Cent Bulletproof. Just don't tell my mom.
50 Cent Bulletproof is a shooter that tells the story of Curtis 50 Cent Jackson fighting his way through the criminal underground of New York as he tries to get revenge on the person who shot him 9 times. If that story sounds familiar, it's because part of it was inspired by 50 Cent's real-life shooting in May of 2000. And although Bulletproof's 50 took to the streets for some good old-fashioned street justice in the aftermath of his shooting, real-life 50 took to the booth, teaming up with Eminem and Dr. Dre to jumpstart a career that would go on to include 5 top 5 albums, 7 #1 singles, and over 30 million records sold. And that's to say nothing about his acumen as a businessman with his own clothing line, beverage, movies, TV shows, and yes, even a pair of video games. All of this makes it incredibly hard to believe that the man who once released a mixtape titled 50 Cent is the Future is not a fortune teller. Any way you slice it, it's impressive how 50 Cent was able to transform himself from a nearly murdered local rapper to a cornerstone pop culture icon.
50 Cent's list of career accolades is like a mile long, but he entered rarefied air when he became one of like 3 rappers to have their own video game. I mean, Wu-Tang had their fighting game in the mid-90s, and if you count him, Shaq kinda had his own game as well, but 50 was special. Here we have the PS2 version of Bulletproof, but you know, Mike just decided to give out halfway through, so we're going to be playing the PSP version. And outside of like a viewpoint difference, I hear the games are pretty similar. I know there are going to be some things that, you know, are different between the games, but I don't know about them, so we're going to play what we got. Onward to the story.
Bulletproof opens with 50 Cent being shot 9 times by an unknown assailant and just barely surviving thanks to some help from his G-Unit boys and a shady street doctor. With revenge on his mind, 50 is able to recover quickly, gear up, and hit the streets in search of some retribution. Aided by an arms dealer Grizz, played by Dr. Dre, and a crooked cop named MacGyver, played by Eminem, the rest of the game is 50 Cent murdering waves of goons, thugs, and minions, while toppling a smattering of the most uninspiring crime bosses I've ever seen. The story never gets more complex than that, and rarely is anything a surprise narratively. You murder henchmen, knock off bosses, and watch a cutscene explaining who your next target is and why. It's repetitive, simple, and predictable, and somehow, despite appearances from G-Unit, Eminem, and even 50's nemesis Ja Rule, the story lacks any semblance of a wow factor.
But I get it, writing a story could be hard. But maybe the gameplay makes up for this week's story.
It doesn't.
Ready for a weird comparison? Bulletproof kinda plays like a great value Saints Row. You can't jack cars, but the gunfighting and melee are similar enough that the comparison is actually not that wild. The game features a wide array of guns that vary in terms of shot speed and damage output, but if you're expecting the gameplay to be anything close to Gears of War, you're asking for disappointment. For a shooter, the gunplay, like a host of other things in Bulletproof, isn't very engaging, and requires no strategy or tactical planning. Just aim and hold the fire button until your enemy is reunited with Jesus. If you opt not to get the strap, 50 can also carry 1 melee weapon in addition to old Besty and the 5 Avengers. The melee weapons were designed to provide an alternative to help conserve bullets or as an emergency option, but they ended up so comically overpowered that for much of my playthrough they were my go-to weapon of choice. Since they ignore body armor and never break, once you find a weapon that works, you're clear to start clubbing folks until the credits roll. More overpowered than bludgeoning enemies with melee weapons is the ability to execute them, mob style. Check it. Pressing circle in front of an enemy allows you to take them hostage and use them as a meat shield. From there, you can hold circle to perform an instant kill execution on said hostage. The entire process is surprisingly effective since grabbing a meat shield only uses up a little bit of stamina, and executing one takes only a little bit more than that. The mechanic is made even more broken by the fact that hostages protect you from gunfire, and since 50 is incapable of taking damage during the execution animation, the whole game becomes easier than spotting a wannabe gangsta in the suburbs.
Would you believe me if I told you this isn't even the worst part of the game? I mean, seriously, this game is so full of garbage, even Oscar the Grouch would disapprove.
Hey there.
Bulletproof fails in a number of places, but none is as obvious or egregious as the poor AI. For real, I've seen smarter actions from horny teenagers in horror movies. Enemies don't react in the way that they should, so an already easy game is made even easier. Goons will stop pursuing you if you retreat too far out of an area, they'll blow themselves up with their own grenades, and they'll even repeatedly walk into obstacles in an attempt to get to you, making them easy targets. They're basically zombies, and I'm not talking about the Left 4 Dead 2 zombies that learn as you play. I'm talking about the Golden Axe zombies who will walk right off a cliff to their deaths with no hesitation if you're anywhere close to an edge. It's that bad. The boss battles feature slightly better AI where they'll roll or flip out of the way, but you won't believe what I'll tell you next. The fights are somehow way easier. You know how some games have you heal in real time where the longer you can heal unencumbered, the more health you can regenerate? Yeah, I totally get why that's a thing. In Bulletproof, healing is as easy as clicking down on the D-pad, and your health refills instantly, which breaks the game in a whole different way. Since healing is instant and doesn't disrupt any of your other actions, spamming painkillers during a firefight is a good way to keep your health up while not hurting your damage output.
Who playtested this garbage?
By the second boss battle, I realized it made no sense to strategically fire and use the environment to hide, heal, or reload. Things were much easier if I got as close as possible to my target and held down the fire button until my enemy was dead. Add in the fact that the game automatically switches your weapon when your current one is out of ammo, and the boss battles are pathetic.
Aside from the terrible gameplay, I also took issue with the perks of this game, especially the collection aspect. Holy cow, is it worthless.
In Bulletproof, 50 can collect money and jewelry by robbing the bodies of dead enemies. Aside from how cringy it looks and the terrible one-liners that 50 spouts while doing so, the mechanic itself isn't actually terrible, and since it's the primary way of collecting money and painkillers in this game, you kinda have to use it. The only problem is that I found the money to be mostly useless beyond stocking up on armor and ammunition, which doesn't cost much in the first place. To be fair, you can also use money to buy clothes, music, or videos, but aside from the videos, which are admittedly pretty cool, most of that stuff isn't worth the effort it takes to collect enough money to buy it, since their implementation is so subpar. Take the clothes for example. You can buy a ton of options from the real-life G-Unit clothing line to change how 50 looks in-game. Sounds cool, right? Not really. It ends up mostly not mattering because the cutscenes are pre-rendered, so 50's outfit doesn't actually change in them, and since the cutscenes offer the most high-resolution look at the character models, changing clothes only to see how they look on the downgraded models is just putting lipstick on a pig.
Worse than that, even though this game is based on a musician, the implementation of music in this game is horrendous.
The game's original score, if you can call it that, features mostly instrumentals from the G-Unit discography with a few original pieces splashed in. In addition to the original score, players can buy additional tracks from the in-game shop in both vocal and instrumental form and use those as the soundtrack instead. But of course, it's never that simple. The problem here is twofold. One, the vocal tracks clearly aren't optimized for gameplay, so they sound so much louder than the game's built-in sound effects or the stray one-liner. The second problem is more preference, but some of the tracks just don't fit the mood of the game. It's fine when you're giving a guy the business to a song like Back Down or Bloodhound, since those songs are more violent in the first place, but no matter how hard I try, I can't think of a less appropriate soundtrack to a beatdown than Candy Shop. Music aside, this game sounds awful. The sound effects sound terrible, and the voice acting is so bad it makes the English dub of Rurouni Kenshin sound decent by comparison. I know 50 Cent and Eminem aren't voice actors, but holy cow, listen to how awful and forced this sounds.
So I did some checking. Turns out you're right. Your boy Spinoza's bad news.
Yeah, I kinda figured that when he tried to kill me in the subway.
That might not have been the first time.
What the fuck do you mean?
Well, he was there the night of the ambush too.
Awful, right? It's like these two guys have never even interacted before in their entire lives. Want to know the worst part? This is one of the better scenes between the two. Yeah, for real. Most of the performances don't get much better than this. There is one saving grace with the voice acting in this game though. I absolutely loved Phil Lamar as Bugs. Something about hearing Osmosis Jones teaming up with 50 to get revenge absolutely tickles me. Other than that, the things I dislike about this game are relatively minor, like how it's called the G-Unit edition, yet there's less G-Unit involved in the console version, or how the game tries to put such a strong emphasis on slang or street talk in some of the non-voice dialogue. The second part won't bother everyone, but my goodness does it feel forced. And as someone who was raised in the suburbs but wanted to be tough, trust me when I say I know when someone is trying too hard to sound like a gangster. The fact that Bulletproof was released at the height of 50 Cent's musical takeover is the only thing that saved it at launch. At the time, 50 Cent was basically a Harry Potter level wizard in that everything he touched turned to gold. But it seems the man with the magic stick lost his magic touch on this one. Bulletproof is a boring, generic shooter whose only saving grace is that one of hip-hop's most iconic faces graces the cover, and for that, 50 Cent Bulletproof earns a Revoke. Even for the die-hard 50 Cent G-Unit fans, this game is only for collectors. It's short, boring, and broken, and as it is, it's definitely not even worth 50 cents.
No matter how big a 50 Cent fan you are, this game just really isn't worth it. I'm the biggest G-Unit fan I know, and for me it was barely worth it. But if you're holding out hope for a good 50 Cent game, I hear that 2008's Blood on the Sand was way better than this game, and I'm sure we'll check that out at some point, but not quite yet. Join us next time as we check out a trio of accidental superheroes. Thank you for watching, and if you liked what you saw, leave us a like, comment, and please subscribe. Oh, and if you see my mom, don't tell her I played this. Tattletales.